And we have with us the guy who produced the actual tour back in the 70s, Mr. Louie Kemp. We're going to have him up here and ask him a few questions. All right, I've never interviewed anyone. Proud to have you as my first interviewee.
Thank you.
Welcome, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So, before we jump into the whole Bob Dylan, the Rolling Thunder Revue thing, why are you here? How did you come to end up here at 82, right?
I made our way a year and a half ago. I was living in Los Angeles. And when the war broke out, I was sitting in my comfortable perch in LA. And I said, well, there's something wrong here. My people, my land are being attacked, and I'm hiding out in LA. I'm not going to do this anymore. I bought a one-way ticket and came here.
Well, tell us a bit about your relationship to Bob and how it all came to be.
So I met Bobby Zimmerman. That's who he was when I met him. That was his calling. When I was 11, he was 12, at a Jewish camp called Herzl Camp. It was a Zionist camp in northern Wisconsin. And we were in the same bunk, and we hit it off right away. We were two of the contrarians on the camp. The counselors would say, do this, we did that, And so we had that in common, and we formed a bond. And Bobby lived at that time in Hibbing, Minnesota. I lived in Duluth. These were both northern Minnesota towns. And so Hibbing was only 16,000. Duluth was over 100,000. So he would come down and stay at my house in Duluth because that's where the action was, And then when we wanted more action, we'd jump on the train to Minneapolis and St. Paul. And those were, big, a couple million people there. So, that's where we'd go. And a lot of the kids that we met at camp lived there. So we'd go hang out with those guys.
You've been friends ever since.
Yeah.
And how did you came to produce the Rolling Thunder Revue tour?
Right. So
you're not in the music business, are you?
No. I was in the fish business, the seafood business in Alaska and Minnesota. And but the year before, Bobby went on a tour called Tour 74 with the band. And we were hanging out in LA. And he said to me, I'm going on this tour. If you want to come and hang out with me, he said, I'm going with the band. You're more than welcome. So I said, okay. So I did. I went on the whole tour. It was an amazing tour. It was the first time he had gone on tour in 7 years after he had his motorcycle accident. And they did write-in. There was such a demand for the tickets that people rolled in. They got 12 million requests for 650,000 tickets, so they had to do a lottery. That's how big the demand was. So I did that, and that was very interesting and great experience. So the next year, after I came back from Alaska, I used to go up every summer to Alaska for the salmon runs. We were in the salmon business up there. And I got back to Duluth, and Bobby was at his farm outside Minneapolis that he'd come to during the summers. So he called me, he said, Louie, come down to the farm, I want to talk to you, and we can hang out. So I said, okay. So I came down there. We played basketball, we hung out. He told me what he'd been doing, I told him what I was doing. He had just come back from New York where he cut the Desire album. Hurricane and all that good stuff. And he played them for me, actually. We sat across from each other and he played the whole album for me. And that was obviously, a great experience. And then he said to me, I have this idea for a tour. Now, I don't want to do like we did last year, like I did last year. I want this to be a small, intimate tour. I want to go to out of the way places, small venues, where people who wouldn't ordinarily get a chance, to come to the concerts and get good seats. I want to go to them. And I want to do it like a traveling carnival. Not just me, but I'll solicit and bring in a whole bunch of other musicians, and we'll make like a traveling minstrel show. I said, well, that sounds good. And he said, well, when I was in New York, I talked to a couple of the professional promoters, and they all told me it wasn't a good idea because I'm Bob Dylan. I shouldn't be doing that. I should be playing big arenas and traveling in jets and all that stuff. And he said, I don't want to do that. He said, so I want you to produce the tour. I said, me? I'm a fish guy, not a music guy. And he said, well, you came with me on tour 74. You saw how it worked. You're a successful businessman. If you can sell fish, you can sell tickets. I said, Bobby, that's a good line, but it's not quite that simple, So he stayed on my case, and he just kind of wouldn't let me get out of it. And then finally I said, okay, I'll do it. And he said, okay, I'll take care of the show, you take care of everything else. I said, okay. After I left, I'm driving back to Duluth. I said, what the hell's everything else? I mean, that sounds like a lot. I said, well, I'll figure it out. And the bottom line is I did, and the tour was a huge success. And it's 50 years ago now.
So just the final question before we go on with the show. First of all, thank you so much for being here. This is a great honor. Can you give us a little an anecdote or a little anything that happened during that tour that stuck with you? Anything that is
Well, there's a lot of things, but I'll give you this one. When we were in New York for about 2 weeks, and they were rehearsing before we went on the road, and Bobby said, I want to get a film crew to go with us. I want to film the whole tour, so I set up a film crew, and we were going around New York, filming stuff. And so I said to Bob, I said, I think I'll go up to CBS. That was Columbia Records, that was his label. And I'll see if, because, we're not playing big halls, and, there's a lot of expenses, I'll see if I can get Columbia to give us some promotional money. He said, well, I don't think they do that. I said, well, I'll find out. Give it a try. So I called the lady who ran his publishing office and all that sort of stuff, Naomi. I said, Naomi, I didn't even know who the president of Columbia Records was. I could tell you who the top fish guys were, but I didn't know who the president of Columbia Records was. So I told her what I wanted. She said, well, they're not going to give you anything. I've asked them before. They never gave us a cent. I said, well, just give me his name and number, and I'll call him, and I'll go see him, and I'll see what I can do. She said, you're wasting your time. I said, that's okay. So she gave me the number. I called it. His assistant answered. I said, this is Louie Kemp. I'm a friend of Bob Dylan's, and Bobby's going to do a tour here starting in a couple of weeks. So I wanted to meet with Walter. His name was Walter Yetnikov. That was the president of Columbia Records. He was, a big shot in those circles. And I wanted to, just let Walter know what's going on. So let me know if he'd like to get together. So she said, I'll call you back. She called me back very soon and said, Mr. Yetnikov would be very pleased to meet with you. When would you like to come? I said, I'll come tomorrow. Okay. So I went up there tomorrow, the next day, to the CBS building. They call it Black Rock. It's clad with all black granite. So, she met me in the lobby, took me upstairs, introduced me to Walter, and I said, Walter, Bobby's going to do a tour. He says, oh, I heard about it. We're so excited. And we're so excited about the Desire album that he just cut that we're, preparing to release. And it's so great that he's out there, doing these things. We're thrilled. I said, good, because we need some help from you. He said, what? I said, yeah, because we're going, I explained to him what we're doing, going to all the way places. Also, we weren't doing any advertising. What we did is we hired a couple advanced guys, and they took flyers, and they'd go to the cities and locations that we wanted to go to that we had booked ahead of time, and just hand out the flyers 2-3 days ahead of time, and we sold out everything without spending 1 cent on advertising. Nobody had ever done that before or since, I think. So, and we didn't even tell the people on the tour where we were going. We wanted it to be a mystery for them too. So it just kind of built up the fun internally and externally. So I explained that to Walter, and I said, we need some promotional money from you. I'd like to have $100,000. So you gotta remember, $100,000 is a lot of money now, but in 1975, $100,000 was a lot of money. It was equivalent to $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 now. And the smile came off his face. He was smiling the whole time prior to me saying that. The smile came off his face. He said, oh, we can't do that. If we do it for Bob, we have to do it for everybody. I said, well, that's too bad, Walter, because if you don't, cooperate with us and help out financially, I can't give you any tickets for the tour for your people. I can't even tell you the itinerary. He said, you can't do that. He said, we have to have tickets for the disc jockeys, for the record store owners. We have to stock up the stores in the area where he's going to be going, with extra albums. We'd be totally embarrassed if we couldn't do those things. I said, well, that's too bad, Walter. I said, if you're not going to help, I'm not going to help you. I said, maybe you can score some tickets on the street. And I turned around and walked away, and thinking, I hope he stops me. And I get halfway to the door, and he screams out, stop, come back. We'll give you the $100,000. I said, oh, great. I said, oh, that's wonderful, Walter. Bob's going to appreciate that, and I appreciate it. Please have it at his office tomorrow morning. He said it will be there, and it was.
Thank you so much, Louie Kemp. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the show. טוב, עכשיו נראה לי נופיע, לא? רוצה להזמין את ליאור יצחקי, רון אפרתי, מרטינה קודלובה ותור נגר. אני אחזור להיות מגניב רגע. מרטינה עוד לא בא, סליחה, אבל תכף יתקבל.